We could get started. That's okay with you. I hope
Of course.
no top secret information is going to be shared. I'm hoping during the meeting.
I
So,
think if any classified information, I have not done my job here. So,
well, so welcome everybody, and thank you for doing this. We're really appreciative of you spending some time with us. I saw the link come by last week, and I said, "Oh, we got to do this." We've been using the Marine Band, for years as our model, but particularly this year since so many resources were available. So they've been watching a lot of videos and all sorts of things. So I thought the format would be just that I would kind of run down some of the questions and then give you an opportunity to chat. So we'll get started here as I enter students as we go. I guess the first thing they wanted to know is what the audition process for your members is like, and do they in fact go to combat training at some point as part of that process?
yeah, no, that's a great question. And first of all, let me say welcome to all of you. I know that this has been a very challenging time for you to be at home and to continue your education from home, especially for the seniors. I'm sure it's been tricky, and especially in band, to not be together, to be able to make music together and play. I hope on the other side of this, when we all come through this, maybe the appreciation for that opportunity to be together will really be very vibrant with you, and maybe you'll have even more fun when you finally have a chance to make music together again. The audition process for the Marine Band is very similar to the way orchestras handle it, as far as, and that was the question, right? How do people get into the band?
Yes.
So we're looking for the very best musicians we can find. And so that's nationwide. We're looking all across the nation to find people who might be interested in serving here and playing, and might be qualified to serve in this organization. And so when we bring people in, we actually do an open audition. So we don't pre-screen, which is a little unusual for professional organizations that might get tapes or recordings and then whittle that down and only invite certain people to the audition. Anybody who meets the age requirements can come and audition for us. We ask for resumes and applications, but then you can show up and play. And so we end up having larger numbers than you normally would have, but it's time well spent because we can uncover sometimes musicians who otherwise might not have qualified to be pre-screened. So people come to audition, they play behind a screen so that we only hear the musicianship. We don't know anything else about them except for what's coming out of their instruments. And we listen to that for about 4 or 5 minutes, get through all 80 to 150 candidates that might show up for an audition for one spot. And then we'll interview those people so we can figure out a little bit more about their backgrounds. Of course, you have to be able to get a security clearance to be in the Marine Band because we are the President's Own. We're at the White House more than 200 times a year. And you need also to be able to be physically enlistable in the Marine Corps. We don't have the same combat obligations that most Marines have. We don't deploy. We don't fight in that way. So we don't have the same physical fitness testing that most Marines have, but we do have to maintain our height and weight to be within standards. So we all do stay physically fit in order to be in compliance with Marine Corps standards. So we need to make sure that people are within the ballpark of that. It doesn't mean you have to be within the standards when you audition, but if you're close, then we know you can reasonably get there before you enlist in the Marine Corps. And then after we have that initial interview, we go through more rounds of the auditions. We get smaller and smaller in the numbers that we're hearing until we eventually get to 2 or 3 candidates. And then at the end of that, I'll pick who I believe is the best musician in consultation with our committee. And then hopefully the interview revealed information that would make them enlistable and a good candidate to serve in this organization. So it takes 2 days to go through the process, and it's pretty rigorous. There's a lot of preparation that goes into the candidates who audition, and we put them through a pretty rigorous test. As you might imagine, the Marine Corps puts Marines through a rigorous test. We do the same thing on the musical side. We want to find out that people are very flexible, that they have a lot of different skills that are going to be needed for success here. And we want to make sure that they're the right candidate to join our organization. We do not go to recruit training, which is unusual. We haven't done that for about 80 years now, and that's because our musicians are considered fully trained to join the Marine Corps when they join for our job. Most of our folks have at least a bachelor's degree. Many have master's degrees and some have doctorates as well. So the Marine Corps considers them trained on what the job they're going to be doing for the Marine Corps. And what we do is we bring them to Washington, D.C. right after we enlist them, and we put them through a month-long training process here, which is everything you would learn in basic training and boot camp without the weapons training and the physical training. So it's a lot of the history, customs and courtesies of the United States Marine Corps, all of the information you need to know to be a staff NCO, what we call it, a senior enlisted musician in the Marine Corps. And you know, and feel comfortable with that role without going to basic training.
Great, thank you. Well, you answered my second question too, about the educational background of the members. Someone asked, can they pursue any outside gig work in addition to their commitment to the band?
Yeah, the answer is yes. You know, we have official and unofficial lives here. Our official lives as Marines is that we play in the Marine band, and the schedule for a musician can be pretty erratic. You know, it's not a typical 9-to-5 job, as with most professional musicians. Our musicians are coming and going at all hours of the day. You might have commitments very early in the morning, very late at night, weekends, holidays. And so it can be all over the place. There's no regular hours for any of our musicians. Depends on what the White House needs, what the Marine Corps needs. But when you're off duty, many of our musicians do play as civilians outside of their official duties, and they do carry on gigs. They have to be very careful to separate their official life from their private life. And a lot of times we have things come in at the last minute. The White House could call and ask for a band, you know, 2 hours from now, and we're equipped so that we can provide that at any time, no matter what the president or the first lady wants. And so sometimes people's professional lives, their personal lives can get, it can be inconvenient. They could have to change things at the last minute. So everybody understands that anything could go away at any time. And their number one job is to be Marine musicians and to serve the President of the United States. So when there is time to do it, people do it, but they also know that they're ready to drop anything at a dime at a moment's notice to come and work in their official job.
Great, thanks. How do they prepare for rehearsals, and particularly maybe how that contrasts to how our student musicians prepare for rehearsals as opposed to being at the, you know, pinnacle of professional musicians?
So because our folks do this for a living, they spend a lot of time on their craft, and they spend a lot of time in personal practice. So we don't rehearse together a lot for every single commitment. In fact, there are many performances we do where we don't rehearse at all. So for a lot of our White House commitments, because they come up so erratic and so at the last minute sometimes, we often will not have a rehearsal when we go to the White House, as crazy as that seems. We have what we call standing folders for both our band and our chamber orchestra that have about 80 pieces each in them. And the band is prepared to play those at any time without rehearsal. All of our conductors are prepared to conduct all that without rehearsal at any time. So we could play about 4 hours worth of music with no rehearsal at any time. So in order to do that, there has to be a lot of personal preparation and practice that goes into that. So our musicians probably are practicing. I saw some questions on your list about how often do the musicians practice.
Sure.
Most musicians will be personally playing 3 to 4 hours a day, just working on their own, maintaining their craft, you know, warming up, making sure that their musicianship is intact, and also practicing preparing folders and music that's upcoming. So at any given time, a musician could have 2 or 3 concert programs that they're practicing for all at the same time, plus all of the White House music, plus all of their ceremonial responsibilities, plus all their chamber music that they're doing as well. So there's a long list of music that always needs to be prepared, and our musicians do that every day on their own. So by the time they come to rehearsal, for the very first rehearsal we have, and we never have more than 4 rehearsals for a concert. That'll be the maximum number we'd have, and more often it's 2 to 3 rehearsals for a performance. That first rehearsal, everyone is 100% prepared. So I expect that they'll come to rehearsal, all the parts are completely learned. They also know everybody else's part because they've listened to reference recordings and they've studied the scores. So they know exactly what's happening in the band. So then I can jump right into making music and shaping the music rather than teaching notes or trying to get ensemble things together. One of the things that's special about a professional ensemble is that there is none of that happening in rehearsal. From day one, everything is together and everybody is prepared to play their parts.
Wow, that's obviously a very different environment. And I'm sure the students are probably pretty surprised to hear the amount of time spent in rehearsal being so small, but we understand why. do they have sectionals ever as part of this process?
Occasionally, only when necessary. You know, our folks play together a lot because it's what they do for a job every day. And so they're very used to playing with one another. And because of that individual practice time, there's no need to get together and do sectionals on a regular basis. But sometimes if we're playing a piece that's particularly difficult or it's new, you know, if it's something that was written for us and we're premiering it, there may be sections that really we haven't quite gotten figured out how they go together, or they're not quite aligned where they need to be. And our musicians will take it upon themselves to get together outside of rehearsal and work on something, get it refined within the section so that we can insert it back into the full band. I don't organize those, nor do I require the musicians to do it. As professionals, they simply know when it's necessary and they take it upon themselves to fix those problems.
Great. So I imagine that's probably, well, could be initiated by some type of section leader. Could you talk a little bit about the part rotation, or does the rank have bearing on the chair seating, or how is that working? How does that work out?
Yeah, so we do have section leaders and principal players for every section. Sometimes that's the same person, but often it's two different people. And the reason for that is the principal players are our musical leaders. They're the ones who set the idea of how the section is going to sound. They address musical issues in the section. They coach people if they need some help on something. Our section leaders are our administrative leaders. So there's the ones that are setting the schedule. They're dealing with personnel matters. They're more on the kind of operational side rather than the musical side. And on small sections, it could be the same person that does both of those jobs. And those people are chosen based on their skill. So I choose principals from within the organization. We don't ever hire principals. So you would not come into the Marine Band to be principal trumpet or principal trombone. You'd come in as a section member, and then people are chosen based on their proven performance and their leadership skills and their communication skills and how good of a colleague they are from within the organization. So that gives them a sense to kind of do the work of the job of the band when they get in, learn the ropes, figure out how we make music here, and then become a leader after that, which is a really good system. And there are opportunities there for anybody in the organization who comes in. You have an opportunity to become a leader at some point, either administratively or musically, based on your own performance in this organization. The section leaders are chosen the same way. I'm choosing the people who are our best leaders, our most reliable, trustworthy, respectful, courageous kind of people that are willing to take on challenges, handle problems head on, not afraid to have difficult conversations when need be, and not afraid to take care of their people, really caring about other people and their opportunities. Those are the people that rise through the ranks to become section leaders and really trusted leaders in the organization. The ranks that we have ranks that are available to everybody to be promoted. You don't have to be a section leader or a principal player to get to the highest ranks, although that is an easy way to do that. If you are chosen for a job that's in leadership and you do a good job, you're going to get promoted faster because you're supposed to be paid more to do a more difficult job. That's the theory. But anybody can attain those higher ranks if you're working hard and you make a really strong impact on the organization in some way. You don't have to be a principal player or a section leader to attain the highest ranks that we have in the organization. And those promotions are given out as they become available. And we have what we call a promotion board. So we have a whole group of senior people that make recommendations to me on who they think should be promoted at any given time. And people kind of compete against each other for those promotions. And then I'll make a final decision on who gets promoted when.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. We had your bio up as we got started a little bit. And the Marine Corps is a little bit different, I guess, in this regard, in the President's own, being that you have your conductors come, I guess, is always as first enlisted members, and then and not all the military bands do it that way. But could you talk a little bit about the conductor selection process and how that works?
Yeah, you've really done your homework. That's pretty good. So yes, all of our directors have traditionally come, well, I should say there's one exception, but they traditionally have come from within the President's zone. All of us were former enlisted members of the band. One of our current assistant directors right now is actually a former director from the Field Marine program. So we have 10 Marine bands across the country and indeed the world. We have one in Japan. And our junior assistant director, Captain Brian Sherlock, was an officer in the field music program, and he came over to the President's Own after winning an audition for us. So the requirement for us is that our officers need to come from within the Marine Corps, which is different, as you mentioned, than some of the other services. So they have to be a Marine already. It could be a Marine in the President's Own, or it could be a Marine out in the field music program, the 10 other bands that the Marine Corps has, but it has to be somebody who's already in the band. So that's the theory behind that. In the Army and the Air Force specifically, they actually have officer conductor programs. So they have opportunities for people who are trained conductors who did their schooling in conducting to audition as a conductor, not as an instrumentalist first. And then if you're selected, you become an officer right away. And then you go into their program and you rotate through all of the bands around the country in the Army and the Air Force, and you take command of different bands, and then eventually might make your way all the way up to the Washington, D.C. bands. But that's a different system than what we have. I think there are positives and negatives to both systems. Obviously, with the system where you come in directly as a conductor, you have the opportunity to be a conductor professionally or in your schooling, and don't have to necessarily be an instrumentalist that could win an audition to join a band as a player. I was a clarinet player in the band. And that's good. I mean, you get trained conductors. The downside is that you don't have the opportunity to kind of learn the culture of being in the military, being an enlisted member, being an officer, the experiences of serving in the military, which is a very unique thing from any other music job that you might have in the civilian world. So you miss that. You just come right in, you train to be an officer quickly, and then you're in charge of a band. Some people are very good at that. Some people might have a harder time with that without the experience. In my case, I came in, I spent nearly 4 years in the band as an enlisted clarinet player. Then I became a junior officer in the band, and then eventually in 2014 became the director. I had all of this time, not only to become a better conductor and learn how to be a better conductor, but also to learn how to be a leader in the military, to learn how to be a Marine, how to talk this language, how to understand this culture and appreciate it. And all of those experiences that I had before I became the director, I think are a big part of the success that I have as an officer now. I would have been very nervous to come in and be right in charge as an officer without all of those experiences I had prior to that responsibility. So while we have a smaller pool of candidates in the Marine band to choose from for conductors, we have a system that helps us get more comfortable with what it means to be in the band, what it means to be in the Marine Corps before you're put in an officer position.
Great, great. I might have a follow-up question later for that, but I want to get through the students' questions first. I was actually fortunate a few years ago to be invited by the Marine Corps to do the music educators workshop. So I know the answer to this question a little bit, but the students wanted, it's much more exciting if you tell about it, the amazing facility that you have. They want to know what type of facility you have. And I've been at Sousa Hall, and it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I wish I could walk you around and show you a video of everything, but we have a great building that was built, completed in 2004. And we really deserved it, by the way, everybody, because we were in the same building at the old post of the Marine Corps, which is a block and a half away, for 200 years prior to that. So we had outgrown that building. It was designed for a Marine band back in the early 1800s that was very different and a very different size than the Marine band of today, which is 154 people are in the President's Own today. Those are both musicians and professional staff that we have here working in the building. So this building is great. We have a huge rehearsal hall that is so big that we actually use it as a performance space too for chamber music. So we give weekly chamber music concerts during some parts of the year, and the public can actually come on to our facility into the Marine Corps post that we have here and watch the band play live. And then we have 15 practice rooms that musicians can use. They often will practice mostly at home, but when they come into the building to work, they also have a space that they can practice. All kinds of office space up on the top floor. We have 3 different rehearsal spaces that are all sound isolated from one another. So I could have a full band playing in a room, have an orchestra playing in the next room over right next door, and you cannot hear anything happening in those 2 rooms, which is super critical because we're often doing multiple things at the same time. We have over 1,200 commitments a year. So do the math. We're doing multiple things every day. We're often rehearsing or preparing for multiple jobs all at the same time, and we need those spaces to be able to do that. And in our old building, we didn't have that. We had one space for everybody, which was not ideal. And then on the outside of the building, you can actually Google this if you want to see, there's a big statue of John Philip Sousa right out front in his Marine band garb from the mid 1880s. It was made by a very famous statue maker. It was commissioned to be dedicated along with this new building. And it's probably one of the best likenesses of Sousa of any statue that exists in the world. And we're very proud to have it right outside of our front doors.
It's a wonderful place. Great place to visit. Next time I'm in DC, I hope I can stop back.
Love to have you.
Great, thank you. Maybe we'll move on to some of the more music-specific questions. I thought this was a great question. For the concert that we just saw the live stream of, I know it was a while back, so I have to think back a bit. But was your interpretation of these pieces affected by the fact that they were film scores, or did you take any artistic license, being that they were detached from the film for the concert?
That's a great question. I think the answer is a little bit of both. Certainly with film scores, I'm not a big proponent. I'm so happy that you guys listen to Marine Band recordings and use our resources, and I'm flattered that you do that, and that's why they're there, is to serve as a resource. But I'm not a big fan of just copying an interpretation that you hear on a recording, even if it's the Marine Band. The score is the ultimate document. Your part is the ultimate document from the composer, and ultimately a performance by the Marine Band is just an interpretation of what's in the score. So your director may choose a different path, different tempos, different ideas that are more in keeping with the score, but not necessarily the choice that a different conductor had made in their recording. That said, on film music, of course, this music was written to be recorded. Excuse me. That's the whole point. It's to accompany the film in its initial form. So I think when you listen to those original film scores, you can't help but believe that is the way that this music goes, more so than what's on the actual score, because it was designed for the film. So I do think that in that particular concert, a lot of my interpretations were taken from what I remember from the films. The tempos, the shape of the expression of the music was in my mind, even though we were doing it as a concert, in my mind, I was thinking of the pictures as we were going. I've seen all the films that music came from, and I couldn't help but think of the film El Cid when we were doing the march. I couldn't help but think of Out of Africa when we were doing that beautiful John Barry theme, and certainly the Star Wars music. How can you divorce what is that action and those characters and those films from John Williams' score? Now here's where we depart a little bit, and it has to do specifically with John Williams, who I know very well. John is a friend. He's collaborated with the Marine Band on multiple occasions. He's conducted us, as you may have seen, on many occasions, including just this last fall when we were in LA on tour. Mr. Williams came out for a surprise appearance. Nobody knew he was coming out, and he surprised the whole audience at UCLA and came out and conducted the band on Imperial March and March from 1941. But even Maestro Williams, when he's done his music for concert, music that was for films, but he's played it in concert, which he does all the time, sometimes he does things differently than what was in the score that was on the film. So he takes different tempos, different expressive license when he plays it in concert than what was on the actual soundtrack. And so for some of John's things, I will do more what he does in concert rather than what the original film score was. And the interesting thing is that when I've watched him work, when putting the music to film, a lot of times you're beholden to the film. You have to go at a certain tempo that matches up with the action on the screen. But when you take the music away from the film and do it as a concert piece, you might end up with a tempo that's more in keeping with what the original intention of the music was, but you are forced to do it a certain way to make it match up with an action scene. And that's what happens with John's music, is he takes tempo sometimes slower in concert than he did on the film, because it breathes more and it's more musical, and he can, because the movie is not playing along.
That's a interesting insight. I never really, one of our initial projects when we went to distance learning was to do a little behind the scenes of a film scoring session, how that works with punches and streamers, and that's a really fascinating way to think of that. You're not, emboldened to the score as much. Let's see here. We got a lot of questions, and I know your time is not infinite here. In terms of the programming, is that your decision? Concert programming?
It is, and not only my decision, but I have 2 assistant directors, and when they have concerts, it's their decision too. I really allow them to program whatever they want on their programs. Programming is really tricky, especially in my job, because we have a lot of different kinds of audiences. If I was going to program a concert for all of you as trained musicians, that music might be a little bit different that I would choose than what I would choose for a general audience on tour. You know, a lot of patriotic people who are coming, a lot of veterans. It might be different than what I would choose for a concert at the White House. It would be different than what I would choose for a concert in a ceremony. So I have to choose music very carefully. In fact, one of the most important things I do other than performing is to choose the music we play, and to understand that we have a lot of different audiences that expect different things from us, and we need to make everybody happy. You know, as an educational resource, to make sure we play music that's challenging for students, and that sets a good example for not only classic repertoire, but also new repertoire, you know, new music that we should all be celebrating. And then when we're out there serving as the flagship ensemble for the Marine Corps and honoring veterans and honoring people who serve and honoring our identity as Americans, well, that's going to be a very specific type of music that I would choose to do that. But I am lucky that I have this band that can play anything, which is amazing, and have an infinite resource of music to choose from. We actually have the largest band music library, I think, in the world. So we have over 10,000 titles in our library here in this building, just of band music alone. And we're adding, you know, hundreds more every single year. So we're a resource not only for this band, but also for bands all over the country to get music that's not available anywhere else. Chances are we have it. And so we're very proud to be able to have that much music because we play so much so often. And it is, like I said, it is one of the most enjoyable things I do, is to be able to choose what this band should play, knowing that I've got literally thousands and thousands of choices at my disposal.
That's that's I guess a pretty outstanding position to be in, to just have all those resources for you. The library itself was pretty impressive down in the
yeah, you've seen it. Yeah.
I've seen with the motorized shelves and all of
Yeah.
that. Let's see. How about if we get into a little bit more technical stuff, especially as a clarinetist? Do you have any suggestions, just overall, maybe non-specifically, for improving technical passages as the students are trying to improve their ability level there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the secret on technique, on finger technique, and just kind of figuring out what to do, the secret for me always was, and it still is, not so much on clarinet, but like when I practice piano, is you have to break it down to manageable chunks. You know, there's a temptation for us to want to like get through a passage and play it right and just keep going through the, you know, even if it's 8 or 10 or 12 bars, keep going through that passage over and over again. But you're going to find that you keep getting hung up on the same little spots. And the only way to get over that hump mentally and physically is to break it down to the smallest chunk you can. I break it down to the smallest chunk I can, and then you work outwards from there. So you'll find that if you do that, and your brain will shift, you'll have a little shift in your mind where you like suddenly you figure out what it takes physically to get through that passage, and then you can put it back into context. And it takes time. You know, I think we're impatient sometimes in general about a lot of things, and we're in a fast-paced world where we want information and we want to get it now. But to do it right and to really burn it into your brain in a way that will stick with you, you got to take the time to do it, and do it in this way where you take it in small manageable chunks and then put it back together like a puzzle piece. When I was playing, I used to break it up in my mind too, mentally. So like if I had a long passage that was technically difficult, I would actually split it up in my mind. So I would think of part A, part B, part C, part D, little chunks, little episodes. You would hear it all as one thing. It would sound like one long passage to the listener, but in my mind, I was breaking it up in more manageable places so I could stay focused throughout a passage and not just tune out and then all of a sudden get off and not be able to get back on with my technique. So that's the biggest kind of nugget of advice I can tell you, is that you can do it. You just have to slow it down, take it in small chunks, and then build it back up from there.
Great. This one may be somewhat instrument specific, and I didn't take note of who was asking it based on what instrument, but the question was maintaining resonance when playing very staccato passages. And the technique is going to be maybe a bit different based on what you play. If that's an answerable question, we'd love your input.
No, that's a great question because it's something that I think is super, super important. Articulation and sound should never have an adverse effect on each other. So your sound is your most important thing. No matter what instrument you play, it's more important than your technique. It's more important than articulation. It's more important than how loud you can play, the quality of your sound is most important. And that goes for students and professionals alike. Our musicians spend the vast majority of their time working on their sound and working on their sound in a variety of conditions. It's almost like a golf game. Like if you play golf or any sport, you might be able to go and hit a tennis ball against a wall over and over again and be fine. You may be able to hit a golf shot off of the fairway 10 times out of 10 and be fine. But what do you do when the ball's in the rough or it's on a side hill lie? Or what do you do when you're trying to return a passing shot from somebody that's not right at you? The quality of your stroke, the quality of how you play those sports it has to be equal no matter what your conditions are. So articulation is the same thing. It might be easy to develop a good sound and to be able to play a long tone and play beautifully. But then all of a sudden now you have to do a staccato passage and your sound suffers. Well, that's a problem. You've got to be able to maintain that great sound no matter what you're doing to it, whether you're doing fast technique or you're playing high, you're playing low, you're playing fast tonguing passages. And the way you do that, again, is to slow down a little bit, to take it one step at a time. So if you're doing fast articulation, you want to make sure each of those notes has a good, solid sound. And the way you do it is by doing it slow. Da, 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 da. You got a good sound in each of those notes. Then da, 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 da. Still a centered sound. And then eventually, da, 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 da. So you're doing the fast articulation, but you're making sure that every note still has resonance and has body. And you can't do that unless you really feel what a great sound sounds like air-wise. You know what kind of air it takes to produce that sound, and then your tongue is simply just interrupting that air. It's not changing the airflow. It's not changing your sound. It's just like Morse code interrupting the air column. Then you will play with a good sound no matter how fast you're playing.
That's great. That's great. That's great advice that applies to all of us. You speak of playing at the White House, doing these national television broadcasts and inauguration, things like that. How do you gain confidence in playing in those environments when it's kind of a high stakes environment, particularly with exposed passages?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you first that I get nervous like everybody else. And even after 23 years in this band, I still get nervous for some types of things because we're performers and performing is hard. It's hard to put yourself out there, to take a chance on the fact that you may not do it as well as you want or that somebody might judge you. And you got to work through that. That's hard. I mean, it's hard for everybody and it's not going to just go away. The way I've gotten through it, through my life, it's kind of twofold. One is just experience. The more times I've done something and the more times I've succeeded, I can tell myself that I can do this. I can tell myself that there's a greater chance that I'll do this well than I will fail. And that helps, that confidence kind of feeds on itself. And there are many things that I used to be very nervous about that now I'm not as nervous about because I know I have the skills to do it and I know I've done it before. So that helps. There's no substitute for experience to at least lower your blood pressure a little bit and make you a little less nervous. But you can't always have that situation. There are things you're going to be doing for the very first time. There's going to be situations that you haven't done a lot and you've got to do it and you're going to feel those butterflies and you're going to feel that self-consciousness. That's totally normal. The way I've gotten through those circumstances is by just faking it, by just telling myself that, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not going to die. This is going to be okay. I've got to make it happen. And I start to just tell myself over and over again that I can do this. I can do this. It's going to be fine. I can do it. And I just fake my way through that feeling. They say fake it till you make it. I don't believe that should work for your preparation. I think you need to be as prepared as you possibly can be for every opportunity. But once you get into the opportunity, then I do think there's a little bit of mental faking that can happen. Just kind of like, what? I can do this. I'm good enough. I can make it happen. Even if you don't feel that, if you tell yourself that, and then you get through it once, then you get through it again another time, then all of a sudden, by the time you get to the third or fourth time through that experience, you've succeeded a couple of times and you can do it. And then your confidence starts to build. But you've got to start somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere. And sometimes the biggest challenge is just simply taking a chance. It's simply just having the courage to just put yourself out there in a position that you're not comfortable with, knowing that you're going to be okay, and knowing that once you get through it once, every time after that, it's going to be easier.
I think that's one of those life lessons that knowing that our students are maybe not many of them are going to pursue music as their ultimate vocation, but that's one of those life lessons through music that transcends all all skills in life. And that's whatever you choose to, wherever your life chooses to take itself.
Yeah. Can I tell a little story on that subject?
Absolutely.
To your point, I mean, I know many of you are not going to pursue music professionally, which is totally fine. I hope music stays in your life for the rest of your life. But this applies to just taking a job interview, you know, going after something that you may want, but you've never done it before. You're not sure you're good enough. You have to take the plunge and just give it a shot. And the very same thing happened to me, ladies and gentlemen, because when I auditioned for the Marine Band, I was just out of undergraduate. I was 22 years old. I had never taken a professional audition before. I had no idea if I was good enough to be in a band like this. I had no reference point, no experience, and I had practiced for the audition. I felt like I had done some work, but I still didn't feel like I was good enough. And I almost didn't go to the audition. I had decided I wasn't going to go. And at the very last minute, I was encouraged by my family to buy a plane ticket and fly to Washington, D.C. and take the audition, because you never know what can happen and what's the worst that can happen. And I had to build up some courage to fly to Washington and potentially fail or embarrass myself and take stock of how that was going to feel to me. And I decided just to go for it. And that was a big leap for me because I was very, very unsure about doing this. And at the end of that day, I won that audition. I was good enough. And not only was I good enough, and I had no idea, I beat out 80 other people for this position, many of whom who were older than me, had more experience than me. And I shudder to think what would have happened in my career sitting here today as the director of the Marine Band after all these years if I had not made that decision to take a chance, because I'd be in a completely different place right now than I am. And it was just that one decision to be courageous and to risk a little bit of my self-consciousness led me to my career. And I'm so thankful that I made that decision.
That's a great story. I think that probably resonates with virtually every student that you just told it to. So
Yeah.
And a teacher too. Maybe a couple of them that are on the call. Just one more, because I do want to give you an opportunity. This was a great one too, though. You've got a whole bunch of high caliber players from within the ensemble. How does the member judge balance relative to the other players, or how much does that fall on you as the conductor? And
Yeah, I think it's about half and half. I mean, one of the things that is really important in any ensemble, whether it's a student ensemble or a professional band like mine, is the feeling of collaboration and ownership. We make music best together when everyone feels like they're a part of the process and everyone feels like they have a say in how we make music together. Now, in a large ensemble, of course, there is a conductor, there is a director, and somebody has to be ultimately responsible for those final musical decisions. So I do make some of those determinations. I do make some of those adjustments from the podium because I'm listening to everything together. But I don't have to make quite as many as you think I might have to make, because the musicians are very invested in playing with each other and very invested in being a part of that process, and they listen to each other constantly. And they make adjustments on the fly. Now, they may not be able to make those adjustments in their practice room, but once they get together in the same room, all of their preparation feeds all the changes that they will make once they hear each other and negotiate with each other. You know, people can't stick their flag in the ground and say, this is where we're playing this, you know, this is the dynamic. Sorry, my phone. This is the dynamic, or this is the, you know, this is the pitch we're going to play at. That doesn't work. And there has to be a negotiation. There has to be a shared sense of understanding that we're going to have to give and take. And the musicians do a lot of that on their own, a lot of that balance work, a lot of the pitch work, a lot of the ensemble stuff. And then I just need to come in to kind of settle whatever disagreements may still be there, or some things that they can't hear from within the ensemble. But I don't have to do nearly as much as you might think. I'm really proud of how invested our musicians are in doing it themselves and really making it as good as they can make it without needing a lot of direction from me.
that's a great model for our students to have as well, to take that ownership and all the level of preparation and investment. I guess one last kind of technical question. In terms of ensemble crescendos and diminuendos, how do you any thoughts regarding pacing those out and achieving the right ensemble sound during? during those moments?
Yeah. I have found that even with a professional band like the Marine Band, diminuendos are harder to achieve than crescendos. It's amazing. It must be a human nature thing. I think it's easier for us to pace and grow a crescendo as you're putting more air through the instrument and you're kind of collectively gathering energy. Coming back down off of that and pacing it properly is like twice as difficult as a crescendo. You may all feel that in the band as well in your own work. Take stock of that, and if you do feel like that's harder to control and harder to execute, have some take some solace in the fact that it's equally difficult for professionals as well. So I think that if you know that diminuendos are harder, it's harder to play soft, first of all, because you have to use the same amount of air, but you have to control it differently to play softly in a wind instruments. And it's harder to gauge and pace a diminuendo. Then mentally, you need to put more energy and more thought into that. The stuff that's harder to do, you need to be more engaged in doing it properly so that it comes out evenly with the stuff that's easier to do. And so our folks really, really focus on that. And I actually do hammer that a little bit in our rehearsals. I do talk a lot about, adjusting that, reminding them that, hey, this is a diminuendo we're going to want to draw out a little bit sooner, or we're going to make sure that we get down soft enough. I do have to encourage us as a band to play softly. It's very difficult to play softly as a group. And when we do it, it's stunning. It's really cool and amazing, but sometimes it needs a little bit of coaxing and reminders. It's a very difficult thing to do, pacing crescendos and diminuendos, and doing it not only by yourself, but doing it with each other all at the same rate.
Right. Thank you for that. So you had mentioned that you might have had a chance to listen to a little bit of the Wind Ensemble's recordings. They were not quite a finished product, but did you have any thoughts, anything you wanted to give you an opportunity to either that or to discuss anything that you felt was really important to share? And I'll kind of step out of the way for a moment.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Star Wars recordings first. I know you didn't have a chance to perform that, but it was in rehearsal. And first of all, I want to say I am super impressed that you're playing those arrangements, because those transcriptions were done for us, and they were done for a professional level group. There's no part of that music that has been watered down from the original orchestral parts. That is exactly what John wrote. It's as difficult as he wrote. That's what's in the film, just transcribed for band, of course. So good on you for taking on that challenge, especially Scherzo for X-Wings, which is really hard. And that's hard for us too. I was impressed with the tackling. I was impressed with the energy that you put into it. I could tell that you definitely enjoy that music and that you were all in on it. I think the hardest thing to do in music like that is alternatively kind of sustained and expressive, and then also really kind of articulated and really kind of aggressive in some ways, is to make sure you're putting enough air through the band, through the instruments all the way through. Like Ray's theme, those long lines, ba-dee-da-da-da-dee, that long line, it just goes on forever. And I think that you can never put enough air through your instruments as you move through those lines. And then the trumpets have the these little counter lines behind it. That kind of contrast is really a hallmark of John's music, where you have a long, expressive, beautiful singing line happening, and then you have these little kind of articulated decorations underneath. And balancing them is one thing, and also bringing out the two different characters is another thing that's really important. So as you get back to this music someday, or like music, just make sure that you are just really singing through those lines with your air. And even in the fast stuff, even in like the scherzo or the March of the Resistance, da 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 da. I like to think of music like that as have renewed energy on every successive phrase. So when you have a tie that goes into a beat, da da da, the next thing that comes after that, da 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 da, and e and da, that's like a new idea, and you almost have to put a little bit more air and a little bit more articulation behind that reset after the tie. Because if you don't, it just can be a little flat line if you're not careful. Da 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 da. But it's not. It's da 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 da. He even writes it in the next part. The brass fanfares. Da 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 da. That kind of idea can happen all the way through the entire March of the Resistance, and that little tweak of kind of resetting the energy or reinfusing it, or kind of putting your foot on the gas pedal for each one of those little parts of the phrase, it brings the thing to life. It actually makes it leap off the page. So something to file away when you're thinking about your own practice and music that's like this in the future, that's a real important secret to kind of keeping music really alive and shimmering all the way through. On the Liberty Bell, now remind me, on the Liberty Bell, you did this as a distance learning project, so you all recorded your parts separately and then you put that together?
That's the case. So we were kind of brainstorming as we knew we were going to be out for a while. All right, what's the plan? And so that was kind of like, all right, let's see how this works. Let's go ahead and get the students immediately involved in this distance learning in a unique way. So yeah, we used your ensemble's recording
Yep.
as like a reference track, because we knew we needed to maintain tempo, but we also
Yep.
needed to maintain a pitch reference too, so we weren't all over the place. So I just took 4 clicks and dropped it on the bottom right before it started, and they listened with headphones and recorded it, sent them all in via our Google Classroom, and then
Yep.
dropped them into Logic Pro and tried to line things up as best as we could, and that was the recording.
That's super cool. I hope you guys are all proud of that, because that is so neat to be able to do that together from your homes while you're safe, and then to put it together and play as a band. And I hope you share that with a bunch of people, because it was really fun to listen to that. It's funny that you did this project, because we just did something like this ourselves with the whole first suite, first movement. And we're actually going to be releasing it today. So right after, after I get off the call with you, I have to double check the last recording and approve it. So we'll put it on Facebook and we'll put it on our YouTube page. Go check it out. It's going to be the exact same thing you did, but it has video attached to it too. So you'll see all of our musicians in their homes recording their parts and playing as a virtual band for this release. So that's super cool that you did that. And thank you for doing it on Liberty Bell, which is a fantastic march. I mean, a lot of older people think of it as the theme song to Monty Python, but it's not. It's actually a really important and famous Sousa march, and one of which he was very proud. And to put on all those bell parts and the chime parts in is a lot of fun as well. So I thought it sounded great for what you were doing. The balances were great. Everybody's part was there, and it was really well done. And it was so much fun to listen to that performance, knowing that that's how you put it together from afar. I'm curious what, kind of your thoughts were on the march. If anybody had any questions or observations about it, we could talk a little bit of Sousa just in kind of performance practice and how we did these additions and why we made the decisions we did.
Sure. Let me see how I can do this and still maintaining student. Let's see here. What I do is, I guess I can trim this off the video. Let me open the chat window. I don't know if this is going to end up on the video. Let me go. If anybody wants to, how do I do this here? Send chat to. That's over here. Host only. Okay, so if anybody has any questions regarding the Liberty Bell and they want to type that in the chat box, I can pass that along, guys. What we did while we're waiting for those to come in, we actually went to your colleagues over in the Army Band did a thing with Loris Schissel on the interpretation of the Liberty Bell, and so we did a little watching of Loris's lecture demonstration. With that, we had an interpretive meeting where we talked about the interpretation to try to unify our approach. Okay, how do you maintain consistent articulation through the ensemble? Was the question.
Yeah, and the articulation is super important in a Sousa march. As you've seen, it's not every note is marked with a staccato or a cap or a tenuto mark. You just have to know, and we've done a little bit of this in our additions, but you have to know kind of how a Sousa march is articulated. And the articulation is one of the most important things. You want to have an articulation that is short and bouncy, but not so short that you lose that tone that we were talking about earlier. So you need to be able to feel the body of the note in every note. It's a little easier to do in 6/8 marches than it is like the Liberty Bell, than it is in a 2/4 march, which has a faster kind of metric motion. But this kind of galloping dun, 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 quarter, eighth, or eighth, 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 but a kind of a roundness to the note. And the way you do it with consistency is just air. I mean, you have to use a lot of air to get through the instrument and to kind of get that round resonant tone to pop through the articulation. Even when you're articulating really aggressively, like, in a break strain where it ba 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 bum, the low brasses and the low register, and they're kind of playing, double forte. It can't be splatty. It's got to really have this big fat body to it, and the articulation is driven by the air. So you don't want to articulate harder than the air you're giving. The air is faster and more pronounced than the articulation. The articulation just simply separates the beginning of that air column, if that makes sense. So, and the other secret sauce, frankly, guys, is just practice. It's just practicing articulation. I mean, we all practice when we do our fast stuff. We practice our technique. We've got to get that passage that's all 16th notes. That stuff is obvious that we're practicing because we need to know how to play it. But some things we don't practice often are articulation. Just taking a note and doing a 6/8 rhythm, da 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 da, before you even play the music. Just getting comfortable with what the shape of those notes are and how you articulate them, and then putting the music on top of that. That's something that we often don't think to practice. You have to force yourself to remember, oh, I've got to get this fundamental in place first. I've got to get this building block set and created before I can actually add it to the structure.
Right, right. One thing I also noticed about our performance of that is when we started to get into the trio section, we got softer, and then we also had a tendency to get slower as well. And then
Yep.
we had a little tear there that finally, I thought about trying to correct it, but then I realized it was better to just leave it as it organically was and learn from that experience. Let me see if there's any other.
Remember, you had 50 plus people all playing their parts on their own, so it's going to pull at the seams a little bit here and there.
A little tricky, a little tricky. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to put in the chat window for Colonel Fettig? They're being shy.
That's okay.
Do you have anything else you wanted to particularly share about, well, just about anything?
Well, I'm always curious, how many students are thinking about, making a career in music. I think a lot of the questions I get often is what does it take to be a music teacher or a professional musician, or even, just to get to the next level of your instrument. And I always, one of the things that I've realized over the years is that you can't do anything well unless you really enjoy it. I think that the number one key to whatever it is, whether it's sports or a particular subject, or certainly music or dance or writing, is it really has to turn you on. It really has to be something that you really are passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, you'll spend more time doing it. And if you spend more time doing it, you will get better at it. And when you get better at it, you'll feel better about yourself. And then you'll be more passionate about it and spend more time doing it and get even better. So there is a cycle that happens. And I hope most of you have felt it, that when you start to spend more time on something, you just will get better. I mean, just the more time you spend on something, you will get better. And so there's a direct correlation between those things. And if you wanted to be a professional musician or you wanted to be a teacher, I would say that, first of all, commit yourself to this is something that you really love and that you really want to focus on. And then it becomes a priority for you, and just spending time doing it. I think that no matter what you decide to do, if you spend time doing it and you really put your heart and soul into it, you will be successful. I have no doubt. I've seen it happen hundreds and hundreds of times before. And then the other part of it is just being ready for those opportunities when they arrive for you. You never know sometimes when an opportunity is going to present itself. And your job as a student and as a budding professional is simply to be prepared for those opportunities when they arise. You can't always predict the future or dictate those opportunities, but you can control what you spend your time on and how much work you put into things that you really care about.
Sage advice. In answer to your question, I would say that probably the number of students on the call right now that are considering those careers is probably greater than 5 and less than 10, based on what they've communicated to us over the, and we have 3, 4, I think there's 4 other band directors on the call right now from middle school and high school. So sometimes they surprise us too with like a senior year declaration. Hey, I was thinking about majoring in music, and we always get a little surprised by that when that happens.
Well, I didn't decide to major in music until my senior year, and I had been playing clarinet since I was in 2nd grade. I did it my whole life practically, but I didn't decide that I wanted to do it for a living until my senior year in high school. So it's never too late to make those decisions. A lot of people don't know what they're going to do until they actually go to college, and that's okay too. One thing I will say, just for the 90 other percent who may not do this for a living, is that one of the things that I know for certain is of value in being a musician. Um, is just being creative, just the opportunity which so few people have on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to create something and to express yourself in a very specific way that music allows you to do that. That is really, really an important part of your education. It helps you to be a better person. Being in band helps you to be a better colleague as well. When you're forced by the very nature of what we do to work side by side together, to create things together, to put yourself out there and be judged for something very personal that you're doing by people who are listening to you as you perform, this makes you a stronger person. It's going to make you better at everything else that you do in your lives and in your careers. You'll become better at communicating with each other, better at working together, better at collaborating and negotiating and compromising where needed. These are all important skills that, of course, we as professionals need to have to be successful, because you're not going to work by yourself in your own room with no one else around. You're going to be working with people. And being a musician is, for me, prime training for those skills that will make you a better professional no matter what you do. So take advantage of those opportunities when you're in band together, where you're creating together. Take advantage of the opportunities to learn how to be a better colleague, to learn how to be a fearless creator. It's going to make you better.
Great, thank you for that. Before we don't want to take up too much of your time. We know this video is going to drop pretty soon. So to that end, could you let us know where we should go to find out more information about the Marine Band, particularly as our associate director, Ms. Wheeler, was saying, even about finding out about upcoming auditions and things of that nature? Where would we go for that?
So there's many places you can go. The prime place is the website. So I could give you the website address. It'd be much easier if you just to Google the President's Own or U.S. Marine Band. You've probably been on the website. We've got a very good website that is easy to navigate. There's tons of resources on there. You can find out audition information. You can find out performance information. Find out when we're going to be on tour in your area. In New Jersey, you're in New Jersey, right?
We are.
We should be there next 2 years from now. So 2022, we'll be coming back through the Northeast. So you can find out when we'll be on tour. You can go to our all of our reference recordings from our website. So there's tons and tons, as you know, of YouTube stuff. So that's the hub to get to anything. You can contact the band. You could email me through our communications office if you had a question or something you wanted to ask of our organization. And then also we have a YouTube channel, as you know, so you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and you can get updates there. And you can see that literally, I think it's thousands of videos we now have on our YouTube channel from all kinds of ensembles, the band, chamber music, jazz band, Latin band, orchestra, you name it. And the educational videos will be going up there too as well in the future. And then lastly, if you want, I know Facebook is super old school at this point and most of you are on other stuff, but we have Instagram, Facebook accounts. So if you want to subscribe onto our pages there, then you'll get this host video that's going to be released here in an hour. You'll see it in your feed and you can check out those things too. And we also release audition information and other kind of breaking news information on our Facebook and social media pages. So that's another way to stay connected to in a more daily way rather than going to the website all the time.
Great. Well, I know my principal would be very mad at me if I didn't tell him that we do have a very wonderful auditorium that seats over 800 people and
Great.
a nice big stage. And we've had the Airmen of Note and we've had the Field Band and the West Point Band, but we haven't had a Marine Band play at the Bernard T. Baggs Auditorium at Bergenfield High School. So if your tour takes us in the neighborhood, I bet you we can fill a house.
We'll definitely keep that in mind, Brian. Thank you. And I appreciate the offer. And regardless of whether we at your high school or even in the surrounding area, I hope we get to see you guys sometime in person very soon.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking time. We will be tuning into the Holst and played that, I think last year, maybe 2 years ago, we did the first suite. So very exciting. And thanks for everything. Be safe. And
you too. It was absolutely my pleasure to visit with you all today. And hang in there. You're persevering through a very difficult time, but you're I'm sure doing a great job. And when you get on the other side of this, you're going to be much stronger for having gone through this terrible experience. And I want you all to stay healthy and stay safe. And and hopefully we'll see you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.